Welcome to the Japan Forum webinar. I'm Ulrike Schede at the University of California, San Diego. Let me share my screen for my intro PowerPoints. All right, so you are, as every week on Tuesday afternoon, 4:30 p.m. and Wednesday morning, 8:30 p.m. at the Japan Forum webinar series, which is organized by the School of Global Policy and Strategy at UC San Diego. GPS offers 7 degree programs, including a PhD, Masters of Public Policy, a 1-year master's, and a Master's of International Affairs with a Japan specialization. If you are interested in our program offerings, please visit gps.ucsd.edu. GPS has a Japan Center called the Japan Forum for Innovation and Technology. We offer a number of programs in addition to the webinar. If you'd like to know more about JFIT, please go to jfit.ucsd.edu. Currently, the webinar series is our most active activity during the summer. And today, of course, we're going to talk about energy. Let me just alert you that next week we will talk about the postponement of the Tokyo Olympics and what it means for the stakeholders of the Olympics in Tokyo. So we'll talk about the current situation in Japan about the Olympics, followed by the politics of Abenomics. And then later in the month, we'll talk about why it is so difficult to manage change in large Japanese companies. Please stay tuned for our future offerings. Today we have, of course, our energy panel, which is why you're here, so I can stop this. You've seen the advertisements. So here are my guests. So let me introduce our speakers today. We have Mr. Nobuo Tanaka and Mr. Jeffrey Rector. So Tanaka-san is a seasoned METI official. He has spent significant time while he was at METI being seconded to the OECD in Paris twice. And he also served at the embassy in Washington, DC twice. In the early 80s, he was at one of the front players of the US-Japan trade wars, which now sound like ancient history. And then he was back in DC in the late 90s in charge of commerce and energy. He then moved on to become the executive director of IEA, which is the world's leading international energy agency. He was there from 2007 to 2011. And so he spent basically 50% of his career abroad. He then returned to Tokyo to become the chairman of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, where he introduced various energy-related programs and also some other things that I think you'll talk about, Tanaka-san. You are now a senior advisor to the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and the CEO of Tanaka Global, which is an energy advisory firm. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Jeffrey Rector is also has a twice thing. He's a double UCSD alum, UCSD undergraduate and GPS at a time when GPS was still IRPS. Jeffrey has also since been on our International Advisory Board. He has been the president of our GPS Alumni Association, and he is the 2020 alum of the year. So thank you, Jeffrey, for everything you've done for JFIT and for the school. Jeff, after he graduated from GPS, got a law degree from Stanford and became an energy specialist attorney. He worked in both Tokyo and the US and San Diego in energy-related project finance, and he's an expert in large lending and policy risk guarantees. So he's an attorney that knows how large power installations are built. In 2016, he started his own initiative to try to build a microgrid sort of thing in Tanzania. Never quite came to fruition because of policy issues. And so Jeffrey is also an expert in how politics is sometimes in the way of energy policy. So we want to hear more about that later, Jeffrey. But today, let's start with Tanaka-san. Tanaka-san, you have some PowerPoints to share, and maybe you can spend about 10 minutes or so to give us your view of the lay of the land of Japanese energy politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiede-sensei, for the introduction. In fact, what I'm going to tell you is the challenge for Japan's energy situation post-COVID and also related to the Fukushima accident. So where we are heading and what problem we have in Japan about the energy sector. Yes, the COVID-19 really created huge economic problems. The current situation, economic recession, is as bad as the one, almost it's the depression. So since the Great Depression, this is the worst kind of economic situation. But energy sector also got a huge hit. The Fatih Birol, one of my successors in the IEA, said that April was the black April for the oil sector because the oil demand collapsed very substantially. 30% of the global demand was lost because of the lockdown of the cities, and orders are not traveling. People are working remotely. Overseas trips are canceled. So the huge impact on oil. Relative to coal and gas, only winner is a renewable energy. And this is what OECD sees in the future. It's that we are not recovering very quickly if the double hit happens of the COVID-19 wave. Maybe, you know, it takes at least 2 years that we reach to the level of 2019 economy. Yes, Tom Friedman says the world is definitely very different. BCAC, before, not before Christ, before COVID-19 and after COVID-19 is a very different world. And probably energy sector, oil sector definitely, but energy sector as a whole would be the case. And this is a very interesting chart about where the oil, coal, gas situation be in the future. IEA, the International Energy Agency, thinks if the likely scenario happens, oil will not peak out in the near future. But when the sustainable future happens, oil peak demand happens very quickly. And that is exactly what Saudi Aramco is worrying about. I was invited to the Saudi Aramco's board meeting some time ago, and their question was, Mr. Tanaka, when the peak demand of oil happens? I said, maybe it's around 2030, but maybe COVID-19 made it happen already. 2019, last year, could have been the peak demand of oil already. And this certainly make a huge impact to the energy geopolitics. This is a chart of import dependency on oil and gas. For example, Japan, Korea import 100%. So we stay in this right-hand side corner, right and top side corner. The green part is exporter of oil and gas. In the United States, interestingly, moved from blue to the green. US is already the exporter of gas and soon be the exporter of oil. So US interest is very close to those of Middle East and Russia in the energy sector. That's the reason why President Trump made a kind of mediator status for Russia and Saudi Arabia's big conflict in April. So those countries importing, depending heavily on the importation, may take much more different strategy than heavily depending on the fossil fuel. The China is interesting case. China is now importing 60% of oil and 40% of gas, but in the future, 80% of oil and 50% of gas. But China tried to use more renewable energy to be energy independent. The United States is using fossil fuel, shale oil and gas for its energy independence. But China's policy is totally different. And in a way, it is sustainable because using more renewable. than fossil fuel. Which way Europe, Japan, Korea, India should go? And this is a very important choice for security, energy security, as well as energy sustainability. Because IEA says oil was the main source of energy before, but in the future, it would be electricity. The age of oil is coming to be over, while electrification is the new energy world, which we have to focus on. How to get electricity more stable, sustainable. That is what the countries must prepare in the future. Yes, and in the COVID-19, the electricity has been declined, but low carbon electricity increase the share compared to coal. So decarbonization still going on in the COVID-19. And yes, CO2 emission was declined in the 2009 after the Lehman shock. And this year again, CO2 emission will significantly decline. But when the recovery happens, without the sustainable recovery package, it would jump back again. But if sustainable, more green recovery plan happens, it could be continuously reducing. Very interesting, Tesla overtake Toyota to become the most valuable car maker in the capital market. So this shows that the public believes that it is moving into the more decarbonized world, and stock market is responding to that very much, even in the COVID-19 time. Japan is prepared to that. I'm sorry, we are not, because Japan's renewable energy share is still very low relative to other countries. Why? One reason is that, because of the less share of renewables and the shutdown of nuclear energy after the Fukushima accident, Japan's cost of electricity is one of the highest in OECD. Can we continue this when the soft or service industry is going to be the major source, and they depend on the sustainable and stable and cheap energy source? Japan cannot compete with our rivals like China or United States or Canada, Russia. Those countries are much cheaper energy source they have. And Japan will face a very serious problem. One of the way to use more renewable is connectivity. Europe is one big market. European Energy Union is what they try to do with collective energy security and sustainability policy. Japan is not. We are separated, 9 regional monopolies. They don't want that to the connection. They don't want competition. This is one major reason that Japan cannot use more renewables and in a sustainable and affordable manner. We had a problem in COP25. We got award of twice the fossil of the day because we didn't commit for that reduction of the coal power plant. But just recently, last week, METI announced that they are going to reduce the coal power plant very substantially in the future. This is the very right first step. I hope this will continue, because the companies are now changing their scope. They are investing more in the financial sector in Japan, is more investing more to the decarbonization of the corporation and ask to disclose risk of financial risk of the climate change mitigation. There are renewable 100 companies, and they are only using renewable in the future. Apple is a typical one. If you want to sell your device to Apple, they ask you to use only renewables. If we say no, we cannot buy it in Japan, then they ask us to move to China to produce the material. The second shame is the problem of women, gender. Japan's gender gap index in 2020 by the World Economic Forum Davos is 121st. What a shame. Energy sector is slow to use more women. We have to change, especially in Japan. Gender and climate change is linked. And we are trying to move ahead by using more women and green finance for the future. This is ICEF, which I'm chairing, and use more innovation for climate change mitigation and involving more women is what I have to do. Women is very good at coping with COVID-19 because women care more about the safety and security and health of family and loved ones. The governor of Tokyo was re-elected with huge majority because she did a good job in COVID-19 protection. I'll stop here, but if I raise a question, if the president of the Tokyo Electric Company had been a woman, could she have avoided the tragedy of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster in 2011? I stop here, just pose this question to everybody in Japan that maybe women's role in the energy sector make a huge difference in the post-COVID world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Tanaka-san. It was a great introduction to the topic and a lot to talk about. I could get right into the topic, but I want to hear from Jeffrey first. So Jeff, you want to share your PowerPoints and tell us maybe a little bit about why these problems that Tanaka-san laid out exist and what your view is on the Japan situation.
Okay. I think I'm sharing. Am I?
No, you're not.
Sorry.
Right. Okay, let's try again.
Try that again. Yes, much better.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this, Professor Sheda. It's an honor to be a part of this, and I'm humbled to be on the same platform as Mr. Nobuo Tanaka, who has done so much for Japanese energy policy in his career. There are 3 points that I want to make with my presentation. First, Japan may be less energy secure today than it ever has been. Second, Japan's energy policy is inconsistent with global trends in energy. And third, Japan's present and future ratepayers and Japan's leading global companies are suffering due to Japan's indecision about the direction it should take on energy. Okay, so Japan does not have a wealth of domestic energy resources, and energy security has been the top line security concern of Japan since the end of the 19th century, when it started to build its navy. Japan has scarce domestic energy resources and imports about 90% of its primary energy needs. It was 80% when its nuclear fleet was operational. Japan has a security relationship with the United States. The United States commits under treaty to keep Japan's sea lanes open to facilitate trade into Japan. And with a decline in American global leadership and a decline in predictability, I think we must conclude that results in increased Japanese energy insecurity. Also, climate change is in the next decade very likely to become a more significant factor affecting opinion on what kind of investments the global society should be making. COVID and its after effects have affected global energy demand, as Tanaka-san just explained. It will also affect our decisions about future investment in ways that are very difficult to predict today. And with that, I would say, Japan is less energy, or arguably less energy secure than it ever has been before. quick refresher on Fukushima. So Japan relied heavily on nuclear for its electrical power generation, about 1/3 in 2011. There were plans to increase. I mean, nuclear energy was a very secure source of energy for a country that depends on imports. But the Tohoku earthquake and the tsunami that wiped out Fukushima Daiichi resulted in its entire nuclear fleet being either damaged or shut down. Many saw the Fukushima incident and heightened concerns about seismic safety in Japan to be creating an opportunity for Japan policymakers and supporters of renewable energy to finally get over the, clear the policy gridlock and invest more in renewable energy. However, since 2011, only 11 of the 50 or so operational reactors have been decommissioned officially, or decommissioning has been commenced, and only 9 have been restarted, to the best of my knowledge, based on data that was updated as of February of 2020. And 30 reactors are there's no clear decision. I don't know exactly where they're stuck, but at the very least, they're stuck at the governor's desk of each prefecture, which has to authorize a restart of a nuclear power plant. And so 30 reactors that some people believe to be safe are sitting idle, and that's very costly to society. Energy and power infrastructure, there are long-lived assets. The shift from one technology to the next takes several decades, and to accelerate the obsolescence of long-lived assets is costly on society. And that's why it's been difficult for Japan to shift. And the country is still divided on whether the nation should restart the nuclear plants. I wonder, with much concern, whether Japan is secretly betting on high efficiency coal. Japan is streamlining environmental review for 22 new domestic coal-fired plants. Japan is promoting high efficiency coal as an export technology. They're advising developing countries who don't have their own institutional capabilities for long-term energy planning. Japan is paying for the expert advice on how to electrify and industrialize, and the advice they're giving them is centralized power, centralized thermal power, and I think that's dangerous. Japan's 3 biggest commercial banks are the world's top financiers of new coal plants globally, and as for Japan's domestic situation, the current government suggests that investing in new coal is okay, because by 2030 there will be carbon capture and sequestration technology that can be added to any existing coal-fired power plant. I don't believe those plans are realistic. Okay. Global trends in energy. So one, climate change is the reckoning of climate change is just coming around the corner. If the world economy does not make significant progress towards decarbonizing the economy, we will see the greatest destruction of capital humankind has ever seen. There are clear trends towards electrification, as Tanaka-san illustrated in his slides, as the principal energy carrier, and away from hydrocarbons, including in transportation. There are clear trends. Let me talk about Tesla real quick. Not only does Tesla produce 5% of the total production that Toyota produces. So Toyota produces 2 million automobiles per year. Tesla produces 100,000 automobiles per year, yet their market cap is roughly the same. Another interesting data point is that just a week and a half ago, Tesla for the first time exceeded in its market cap the market cap of the world's largest oil and gas producer, ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil is valued lower than Tesla is today, and I think that's interesting. Japan's energy policy, to the extent it has one, in my opinion, is inconsistent with these global trends. who's paying the price for that? Who's paying the price for policy paralysis? One, Japanese ratepayers. The indecision that about those 30 power plants, it costs money to keep a plant operational and safe prior to decommissioning. I mean, right now, I assume that with few exception, the utilities are keeping these plants staffed to keep things safe. They have to. Yet they're not producing power. They're not producing value for the ratepayer. I don't know who officially is burdening that cost. It's probably officially burdened by the utility. However, sooner or later, that's going to be passed to the ratepayer. And a weak electric utility means that the utility is unable to plan for the future. Tomorrow's Japanese ratepayers are paying for this paralysis. Every new coal-fired plant that's built is probably not going to be used for its useful life. And when that thing is retired early, someone's going to have to pay for it. Japan's best known companies, Japanese automobile makers like Toyota, they should be a player in electrification of personal vehicles, but they're not. They're not, perhaps because they didn't have a home market in order to build experience as a result of the energy shortages that followed. First of all, Japan never really went out hard for EVs. I don't understand why, but after Fukushima, I understood why. Because there was a need to reduce energy consumption. We couldn't be adding to electricity demand when we don't have a plan for where that energy is going to come from. This has been a burden for Toyota that perhaps is fatal to it. Maybe that's why Tesla is worth more than Toyota today. Also, I believe there are hundreds of Japanese companies. I mean, I don't know if there is a country more energy efficient than Japan. Perhaps there isn't. Perhaps at least in the G20, there certainly is not. And notwithstanding a very efficient economy, they immediately after Fukushima and the shutdown, and not just Fukushima, but the shutdown of all operating nuclear power plants, Japan did not need to shut down its economy. They changed consumption behaviors, and they also invested in energy efficiency, invested in things that I really think that there must be companies that are positioned to show that and share that with the rest of the world, if only they had a safe market at home. And I'm making reference to some of the ways, maybe Japan's post-war economic development history, it definitely did take advantage of a safe domestic market in order for certain globally competitive companies to get out there. All right. Why is it so hard to plot the course? Well, number one, I mean, this is a very difficult problem. I don't want to pretend that if only they had smart politicians and smart bureaucrats, then there would be an answer. I don't know what the answer is, but there is no consensus on what the policy is. And so the status quo continues with very slow incremental change. I wonder whether there will be change in time for Japanese companies for globally competitive Japanese companies to stay relevant. I wonder, are overly powerful utility companies who have captured their regulator blocking change and bringing the country down? I know that's a bit provocative statement, but I do think that perhaps they have gotten too powerful, and the large organizations whose business is to make use of the existing asset base, that is their business. They're not going to be the leaders of change. They're going to do whatever they can to protect their business. We should expect that. And knowing this, it would be foolish to rely on the utilities to be a driver of change. And I question whether there's enough interest in Japan in civil society to cause there to be significant change. A couple last final points. I mean, Japan is a conservative society. It is slow to change. Who am I to say that they're going too slow? What do I know? Maybe it's just right. Maybe sudden change would be too disruptive and to put too many people out of work. But I think that's a question that's worth considering. And you know, many critics or observers of Japan, you know, were pulling their hair out, wondering when Japan was going to have a more responsive response to the debt crisis in the 90s and the stagnation in the 2000s. They muddled along, but they seem to be doing okay. I've got a lot of Japanese friends who maybe have a higher quality of life than they would have had in the 80s. Okay. Oh, and I just, let's see, last point. I really think this is going to have to come internally. I really don't think I don't think there's going to be a foreign influence that says, Japan, you need to set yourself straight. I think this is something that is going to happen internally, notwithstanding, you know, Japan is going to be under pressure. Well, I'll leave it for that. I think Tanaka-san might have some good retorts for that. And finally, this is just the 3 points that I made is one, Japan may be less energy secure today than it ever has been. The energy policy of Japan today, to the extent there is one, is inconsistent with global trends, and certain Japanese leading companies and Japanese ratepayers are footing the bill for this indecision. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. If you could stop the share, then I can bring us all back in. Let me try that. I have to click a button here, one moment. Okay, here we go. Thank you very much, gentlemen. This is a great start. The audience can participate in our conversation now by typing in questions and answers. We already have a few, which I will bring into our exchange here momentarily. So if you have a question, feel free to write it up, and I will combine these questions and see whether we can have we can find answers from. So I have actually I have so many questions I could hog the entire time, which I should not do. But I do have a question about the vision then, right? So Tanaka-san, I know that you have a lot of visions for Japan and a lot of ideas, and so I'm wondering whether you could maybe react a little bit to what Jeffrey just said, and also share with us your ideas of what this whole nuclear situation looks like. I mean, so it's not, by the way, for those of you who don't know Jeff, he's not an advocate of nuclear power. As far as I understand it, Jeff, you're just saying that having these plants sitting idle is a waste. And it makes no sense if there's no plan around them, since they're sitting there anyway. We might as well use them. But there's also a future question, right? So what would be a future of nuclear power in Japan, Tanaka-san? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and thank you, Jeff, for your very good comments. I cannot agree more what you have said. We are in deep trouble about this future energy security, and how can we change it? But as I said, Japan has started in a way, we are realizing the global trends or change in a very substantial way, the movement toward more renewables, more sustainable future. So we need to use more renewables, just reduce coal, just as METI has recently decided. It's still the beginning, it's not the end. And the very important thing is, as I mentioned, is a demand side. The big corporations, as you say, I think to sell their products globally, they have to be sustainable also. If you are a producer of some panels or devices for Apple, you can only use renewables to sell to Apple. And global corporations going to be like that. How can they continue to buy electricity generated by coal power in Japan to stay? So they may go out of Japan, and we will lose jobs, we will lose wealth and industrial capability. So inevitably, and we will change to that direction. I call it the demand side driven transformation is happening. METI or government used to lead this kind of energy transformation by introducing more nuclear power efficiency after the oil crisis, because the price of oil went so high. We tried to use the more nuclear power, gas, coal and reduce dependency to the Middle East. That was a government policy for supply energy security. But what is now happening to cope with global societal change for sustainability, the demand side will drive the energy supply. This is a probably new feature. And METI cannot resist because they are forced to change called power policy now. Gradually though, but so can we be in time to this big change? This is the really challenge. And as you say, who pays is a very important point. It is a taxpayer or a ratepayer, big corporation, and for the technology drivers. So sadly, we will have a serious problem. This regional monopoly of 9 big utilities must be transformed. That is the basic need, what the government should do. But if the government cannot, demand side will do. The future of the nuclear power, just as Shede Sensei and Jeff, you say, we have only 9 reactors operating. Some of them already shut down for maintenance, but 9 basically given the license after the accidents of Fukushima. Out of 48 operable reactors, the cost of shutdown is 1 trillion yen, means about $10 billion a year by importing more gas to replace the shutdown nuclear reactors. And and also maintenance cost is also necessary. So the best way is to use more nuclear power. Restarting makes sense because it is a sunk cost already. So the current standard of safety regulation in Japan is the most restrictive one. So why not restarting the current reactor, but not building the new one? This is the point. Big light water reactor is no longer competitive because of the cost of security safety is too high. So the world, the nuclear technology is moving toward small modular reactors. The US is the leader, though small modular reactor has never been deployed in the world, so we don't know how it works. Maybe we need to build quite a number of volume to make it efficient. But at the same time, regulatory status or regulator will change because its current big light water reactor is 1 by 1 check. But if the factory built small modular reactor can be tested once and licensed to the whole series of the reactors produced succeedingly. So the cost of transaction or license could be much, much smaller. So small modular is, if there is a future of the nuclear power, this is it. And fast reactor, which is different from the light water reactor, which is American technology in the Idaho National Laboratory. Finally, Japanese government and US government start to jointly develop the so-called versatile test reactor. And this is a future advanced reactor system, which may be much more safer, much more proliferation resistant. So I think Japan and US should lead the future technology, which is safer and proliferation free, means not weaponizing. There's countries who use the nuclear technology for weapon, but we have to stop it. And there is a technology which can make it happen. So Japan should should clearly declare that there's no future for the big light water reactor. So we have to move towards small modular reactor with cooperation with United States. This is the probably, if there is a future of the nuclear power, this is it.
Thank you, Tanaka-san. So, so there's still this question of how to get there, right? And what do we do in the meantime? And we also have from the audience a number of questions about the energy mix right now, which I believe is, so nuclear has been replaced with gas and oil imports and coal imports that are put into these power plants that are now maybe being shut down, or maybe there are new coal power plants being built. It's also a question about hydrogen. What's the role of hydrogen in this mix? And then there's just to add to this kind of, sort of alternative question as to why is solar so much more expensive in Japan? I mean, what's, and so let's go a little bit through the energy mix real quick and lay out how that's working.
Okay. Yeah, well, solar is very expensive in Japan because we started late relative to Europe or United States, and we introduce. Japan get very serious about solar photovoltaic after the Fukushima accident, and put a very high feed-in tariff. It is, I would say, the price already fixed to the solar generator for a certain period of time, 20 years, and then this is charged back to the ratepayer. So the introduction mechanism of feed-in tariff system makes the solar or wind power very expensive in Japan. But this tariff is gradually reduced, and also the research and development in solar has been progressed very much, and the cost of solar and wind is getting less and less, and very cheap. The IEA declared that solar photovoltaic will be the cheapest source of electricity in many countries in the future. So Japan should introduce more solar and more wind, because if the cost is cheaper, how can't we use it? So it's the issue is not the technology, it's more regulation or power market structure. The 9 regional monopolies who wants to continue the status quo of big nuclear power or big gas or coal power plant and make a very stable and safe supply is what was aiming at. That was fine. After the oil crisis and World War II, Japan is very successfully provide the very stable electricity by this system. But to cope with the sustainability challenge, maybe we need a new power market. That is what the METI is trying to do, but still this transformation is not fast enough. We have to do more. Hydrogen. Hydrogen is a very much of the Japanese, let's say, promoting. One reason is that Toyota's hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, Mirai, that came to the market some time ago. And because there's no carbon dioxide emission, very, very safe and also sustainable. So if the electricity is generated to produce hydrogen by sustainable way, then it is a carbon-free fuel. There's 2 ways to produce hydrogen. One is abundant solar or wind can be used for the electrolyzer. And water can be transformed into hydrogen and oxygen. So this is called green hydrogen. Another one is from gas or oil or even coal to take out hydrogen and carbon dioxide be stored underground or utilized somehow. It is called carbon capture and storage. So this hydrogen is called blue hydrogen. So either way, this hydrogen is a clean, I mean the decarbonized fuel. So the hydrogen can be used for the car by the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. It can be burned in the power plant as a clean power source, or it can be provided through the gas pipeline for the family to the clean, carbon-free gas. So hydrogen could be the future of sustainable future of the fuel, but the cost is still high. So carbon price or carbon tax must be levied to make it happen. But China is now getting very serious because China is using full of the renewables and they have probably abundant renewable sources. So they try to use hydrogen as a storage of this excess electricity. So when the China became very serious about hydrogen, all international players about hydrogen is getting serious too. Germany is also serious about hydrogen. So hydrogen could be another very possible energy future.
Yeah, and Toyota announced in January that they're building the Woven City, which is a city of the future, a smart city, which will be, it's just a square kilometer, I think. So, you know, small place, but they're going to make everything so smart and it'll be completely hydrogen powered. So there is a test case already being set up. Let me ask a little bit more about the technologies. Jeffrey, you had mentioned to me in an earlier conversation that, and you pointed at it in your slides, that there are more than 100 Japanese companies that are actually, that have deep tech advances in anything from battery technology to other renewable technologies. And for some reason, they cannot get going, right, within the Japanese system. Why is this? I mean, there's so many startup policies and so many sort of, there used to be so much enthusiasm for technological inventions and innovations around energy. What has happened to Japan that these domestic companies that are developing these technologies don't get a domestic playground, if you wish, to test them?
Well, I will make an attempt to answer that because there really is a bit of a mystery as to where is the expertise on energy efficiency. I mean, does it come from constant incremental improvement, or is it a core technology? It's probably a combination of both. You know, some of the technologies that I think that are, you know, relevant for Japan's response to the Fukushima crisis. You know, telecom that coordinated the operation of HVAC, which allowed for the utilities to in synchronicity. It's just to at the same time shut down air conditioning and heating loads when needed. And this was, you know, so it was, in other words, a virtual power plant, because they could create capacity by shutting load off. Now they've been doing this in the United States as well, but I do believe that Japan has some expertise there. I mean, clearly in battery technology, Japan is a leader. Maybe this is something I wish I understood better, but maybe they are the global leader, or Panasonic is the global leader in battery technology. I don't know how much of the IP belongs to them and how much the IP belongs to Tesla in the gigafactories that they're building together. But you know, I felt like Panasonic is, when I was thinking about them and who's paying the bill for Japan's indecision, I think maybe Panasonic is okay. I think they're a global company, and they don't need a Japanese market. Maybe they're okay. But there are other companies. There's one that I met like at a trade show called Tabuchi Electric. It's a fairly large Japanese company based in Kansai that, you know, that has battery management technology, that you know, can support, you know, distributed energy resources, you know, in the grid, or you know, servicing the grid. And an investment in energy storage can defer an investment in transmission. That's one of the things that California is doing, and in the Northeast of the United States. There really is a trend toward DERs as the lowest cost investment to provide essential services in electrical power. And I think Tabuchi Electric could be a company that would have a global platform if they could only get some momentum in Japan. I wish I could give you some more examples, but I'll leave it with that.
So we're getting some questions also around the politics of this also. I want to learn a little bit more about these EPCOs, right? There are these 9, I guess.
EPCOs? Oh, EPCOs.
And Tanaka-san, you have this theory about they should do what the what the landlords or the daimyo of the Han and the, you know, at the end of the Tokugawa period did, that they relinquished their power, they abdicated their power and gave it back to the government so that Japan could unify. Can you tell us a little bit more about your idea about the what is it again? Taisei Hokan, is that what it is? The theory of this power abdication, and is that a pipe dream, or is this something that maybe you know? And then let me connect it to, or let me just ask that question.
Thank you very much for asking about the Taisei Hokan. Just let me share the screen for the Taisei Hokan slide. This is the one. Yeah, this is what I wrote some time ago. How we can start this big transformation. Because I mentioned about regional monopolies, I mean, kind of as a big obstacle of the transformation of the power market, or unbundling of generation and distribution. And MEDI, in a way, are in trouble of the Fukushima accident, and Tokyo Electric was collapsed and became nationalized. And MEDI stopped thinking about the future because they are feeling the responsibility of the Fukushima accident. They tried their best and put all the resources, human and money, to the recovery of Fukushima. That was fine, but because of that, you know, there's no kind of visionary or step forward to the future in the government. So who can start this big transformation? And I thought maybe it is TEPCO who can start the transformation by giving up the nuclear power generation and return it to the government, which you mentioned, Shiede-sensei, the Taisei Hokan. Taisei Hokan is at the Meiji time. To start the Meiji, the last shogun Yoshinobu decided to give up the shogun power and return the power to the emperor. And this triggers the Meiji Revolution. Of course, Meiji Revolution started with black ship, Kurofune of the United States. Admiral Perry started the opening up the closed society, Japan, but the shogunate collapsed because of this return of the power. So if TEPCO already decided to give up thermal power by making joint venture with Chubu Electric called JERA, so they don't. So TEPCO do not have thermal power. If they give up nuclear power, they are only the transmission company. Transmission company of Japan, they can buy any cheap source of electricity generated by nuclear or gas or renewables. And Kansai Electric should be a host of nuclear power of Japan, while giving up transmission parts to TEPCO, and TEPCO becomes the single Japan's transmission company. If that's the case, this company's share is very successful, and government will get the pay if they open it back to the market. So to start the big transformation of the power market, more connectivity, or using of the renewables more, or the future of the nuclear power, this kind of first step is giving up by TEPCO. I even told chairman of TEPCO some time ago that your role is to return the nuclear power to government and let them think seriously about the future. This is what I meant by the Taisei Hokan. Thank you, Shiede-sensei, to remind me of this issue.
Yeah, well, thank you very
much. May I ask a
really interesting theory. Jeff, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so the government of Japan is the controlling shareholder of TEPCO. What's stopping the government from? I mean, we don't need to wait for TEPCO to do it. Its leading shareholder
Right.
can make it happen. Why isn't it doing that?
I don't want to call them the brain dead, but they don't want to think about the big revolutionary transformation like me. They think it is necessary, but they don't want to start that by themselves because they are not confident and they are not trusted enough by the Japanese ratepayer or taxpayer. So they don't want to dare to start this big revolutionary idea, even though they think this is the only way.
So as somebody who's just written a whole book about really what the theme is that slow is good and slow is not stagnant, slow is, you know, slow reflects a trade-off that the Japanese government is making, the reflecting a preference of stability over things like economic growth or even in this case, you know, a shift to renewable energy. So, we have several questions, including from Robbie, around what, and you mentioned it also, Tanaka-san, that this could be a demand side story, right? So if people were to ask for it more, it might happen more, right? And so is there a need for a push by the general public, and is there a lack of education around this? I mean, so Robbie was mentioning that retail electricity in Japan is very expensive, but Japanese in general don't know about that. And a friend of mine reported recently that she was teaching a class at a very good Japanese university, and she asked the students what they thought the issues of the day were, and none of them mentioned global warming or energy. And so is there a need for creating more demand and more, you know, and more of a discourse in Japan that might get the work going? Or?
I cannot agree more. Yes, you're right, Shede-sensei. And Jeff clearly mentioned about the civil society, role of civil society. I cannot agree more. So the more education, more information is necessary about what's happening outside of Japan towards sustainability or decarbonization, how Japan should compete with this global challenge. So, and this is happening, but major power or driving power of reform comes from the financial sector. I pick up a slide of TCFD, Task Force for Climate Risk Disclosure, which is a G20 movement, and many Japanese companies signed up to this, let's say, guideline. So by disclosure of these climate risks, the financial corporations like big banks are not investing into the companies who use the electricity generated by coal power or doing generation of the coal power. So this financial pressure is already happening. It was not the case 2 years ago. It was started 2 years ago, and now every day in the Nikkei, Nippon Keizai, Japan Economic Journal, there is an article about sustainability, SDG, ESG, TCFD, anywhere, almost every day. So now the awareness of sustainability is there, and the financial sector is moving toward that. So big corporations, Panasonic, Toyota, Sony, these companies are moving toward that. So once this momentum happens, I think change of Japan is very quick. It takes time to get the consensus toward that direction, but I think this is happening much faster than what we are thinking, much faster than what Saudi Aramco or Exxon or some of the fossil companies are thinking. I think this is already there.
Well, I'm glad that we can end on such a positive note. I mean, this is actually reminiscent of the discussions we had about Japan's tight culture and how it takes forever to make a decision. But the benefit of Japan's tight culture is that once a decision to change is made, it actually happens very, very fast, right? And so I completely agree with you, Tanaka-san. There is a different wind blowing around us, a different discussion has begun, and including actually within the companies like TEPCO and KEPCO that don't want to look like these, you know, kind of old style places, and so they're trying to change as well. So let's keep ourselves updated on this. Maybe we should have a follow-up conversation on this in about 6 months and see what has changed. Thank you both very much for joining me and making time in your busy schedules to be here with us today, and thank you for a terrific conversation. And audience, thank you for great questions. We hope we touched upon most of them, and if not, please send me an email and I'll try to follow up. I'll see you next week with a discussion of the Olympics. Take good care and stay safe. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.